They dismissed her because she was black. But in the end, she was the partner in disguise. Sounds exaggerated, like a movie script, maybe, but it's not. This story is real, and it might be closer to you than you think. Because what happened to Ayla could happen to anyone. Or worse, it could already be happening to you and you don't even notice. Ayla walked into that investment firm like she had no particular reason to be there. Simple clothes, natural hair, a discreet posture. As she crossed the lobby, she heard whispers, noticed sideways glances. Nobody knew who she was, but somehow, they already knew who she couldn't be. Miss, this area is restricted. Reception's over there. Okay, said an analyst, without even looking up from her screen. All right, thank you, Ayla replied with a soft smile. She moved on, quiet, observant, taking mental notes of every gesture, every word, every look of disdain that lingered through the hallways like background noise. And sadly, it was routine. The receptionist, white and prim, rolled her eyes at the sight of Ayla's temporary badge. Visitor, probably maintenance. Little did she know that the woman walking past was actually the firm's newest partner. This story has a name, covert racism. It's not the slur, the direct insult, or the screaming offense. It's the silence, the diverted gaze, the whispered joke. It's the constant assumption that someone like Ayla doesn't belong there. It's the preemptive judgment dressed up as professional instinct. And these are the stories that reveal who's ready to lead and who still needs to learn the basics. Respect. Ayla knew that, and she also knew she didn't have to prove herself. But she chose to face it, not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of purpose. For justice. For every other ALA who has been pushed aside, ignored in meetings, passed over in interviews, dismissed from promotions, silenced in decisions. For 3 days, she participated in a silent immersion program. She watched from behind the scenes. She saw who greeted only the Sutante crowd, who explained concepts only to the men, who interrupted black women mid-sentence, and who completely ignored them. She took notes, not to punish, but to transform. Because these stories only change when someone dares to break the cycle. On the last day, everything changed. A meeting with the board of directors was scheduled. Everyone was present. Some with that superior expression, others adjusting their suits, smiling only at those on the important list. Then she walked in. Same hair, same clothes, same badge. But this time, she was accompanied by the company's president. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to officially introduce our new partner, Ayla Marks. She'll be leading our diversity committee and will oversee the cultural restructuring of our headquarters. Many of you already know her, but perhaps you still don't know who she really is. Silence, discomfort, awkwardness, eyes widened, mouths half open. Most couldn't even hold her gaze. Others tried to smile, greet her, justify themselves. But Ayla was direct. I've been here these past few days. I walked your hallways, sat in the cafeteria, spoke with the cleaning staff, the baristas, the security guards, and in all those places, I found more dignity and humanity than in these glass-walled offices. This company has talent, potential, structure, but it's missing something essential, collective character. She didn't raise her voice, but every word struck like thunder. I'm not here to fire anyone, I'm here to teach. And teaching hurts sometimes because it confronts, because it dismantles, but it's the only way to build something truly worthwhile. The room, once full of egos, now overflowed with silence. The kind of silence that comes when people realize respect isn't a reward for status, it's a duty. The silence of those who finally understood that power isn't in a golden badge, but in the courage to bring about change. As powerful as this story is, it's not an isolated case. It sheds light on a reality lived daily in countless companies. How many ALAs will still be overlooked before someone sees beyond skin, hair, or accent? How many leaders still confuse appearance with competence? How many organizations will continue reinforcing exclusion in the name of corporate culture? While you're reflecting, other stories are already being written. And you know what stings the most? The fact that maybe the prejudice isn't just in the structure, but in the automatic attitudes no one ever questions. Maybe even you, without realizing, have judged someone like that. Or worse, stayed silent when you could have made a difference. But here's the truth. Character is revealed behind the scenes. Leadership shows in the details. And respect is built through action. Ayla wasn't the exception. She was the mirror. And you, will you keep pretending not to see, or will you start writing stories that truly deserve to be told? Ayla entered the building carrying a universe of stories in her gaze, yet was treated as if invisible. She dressed simply. No designer brands, nothing that screamed power. And that's when the game began. The receptionist didn't even lift her eyes. The sideways glances from executives made it clear. She didn't fit the mold. But what many still don't realize is that today's prejudice doesn't yell, it whispers. It hides in subtext, in silence, in doors that never open. These everyday corporate microaggressions are what keep exclusion stories alive. The ones where a flawless resume is ignored because the hair isn't straight or the skin tone doesn't match the successful professional stereotype. Ayla felt, on her own skin, what so many black women endured daily. judgment before being heard. And that doesn't just happen to visitors. How many ALAs are overlooked in meetings, passed over for promotions, or even excluded from hallway conversations? The great irony is that in a world that claims to value innovation, many still judge the book by its cover. When was the last time you truly listened to someone who doesn't dress like you, speak like you, or come from your background? Because it's in those stories that the greatest lessons lie, but only those with humility will learn. And in this type of setting, where silence speaks louder than words, corporate masks begin to fall. During the new project presentation, Ayla sat among the executives like any professional should. But the moment she opened her mouth, she was cut off, dismissed, or worse, ridiculed with razor-sharp subtlety. One manager even said, "Did the cleaning lady enter the wrong room?" They laughed, but it wasn't a joke. It was veiled violence, the kind that wounds deeper than screams. The environment claimed to be professional, but in truth, it was a stage where exclusion danced in suits and ties. And the curious part, none of them thought they were racist. None of them saw themselves as oppressors. After all, they used polite words, sleek PowerPoints, and sipped imported coffee. But that's where the danger lives. When prejudice hides beneath formality, when exclusion comes with a smile, a tone of voice, or a standard procedure. Many of these stories keep repeating because those at the top don't see who's been left behind. What Ayla experienced that week wasn't an isolated incident. How many workplaces remain hostile to those who don't fit the majority mold? How many brilliant ideas have been discarded simply because they came from unheard voices? Those who live in exclusion often don't notice until the truth knocks at their door, or sits right beside them, disguised as a visitor. When the board director asked everyone to stop and listen to a special guest, the room filled with condescending glances. But the moment Ayla took the microphone, the atmosphere shifted. She didn't just know the company's numbers, she was the numbers. With surgical calm, she revealed that she had acquired 52% of the company's shares through a silent merger with an international fund. In seconds, the so-called cleaning lady became the new majority shareholder, and the silence once used against her now screamed through the hallways. The reaction was straight out of a movie. One executive choked on his coffee. Another pretended to get an urgent message on his phone. No one knew where to hide. Because, you see, most of them didn't even know her name, and now they'd have to call her ma'am. But Ayla wasn't there to humiliate anyone. Her plan was different, to show, with intelligence and strategy, how certain stories could have been written differently if people chose to listen before they judged. That unexpected twist was more than a shock, it was a mirror. A harsh reminder that those who seem to be beneath us aren't always where we think. Ayla knew exactly what she was doing from the moment she walked into that company. And she used others' superficiality as a springboard to reveal a truth many avoid. Real power doesn't shout, it watches, it waits, and it acts. And when it acts, few structures remain standing. Ayla could have just announced her position and left with grace, but she chose something far more powerful, to use her voice. Standing in front of a stunned room, she delivered a speech that didn't just expose structural racism, it dismantled it, brick by brick. Without yelling, without losing her composure, she spoke firmly about how prejudice disguised as formality corrodes not only a company's culture, but also its future. And it was in that moment that many stories began to be rewritten. Right when truth met courage, Ayla's words went viral. Someone recorded parts of her speech, and within hours, it was circulating across the company's own social media. It drew likes, emotional comments, and even coverage in the press. But the most important impact happened off-screen. A collective discomfort began to seep into every meeting room, every email, every hallway, coffee break. Those words didn't just echo, they woke people up. Because no one could say, "I didn't know anymore." It's curious how truth, when spoken with purpose, can change the air around it. Ayla didn't give a diversity lecture, she held up a mirror, and no one was prepared to see their reflections so clearly. If they'd ignored her before, now it was impossible not to listen. And more than that, impossible not to act. Because when a speech becomes a seed, the next stories are already beginning to sprout. The bombshell hit the heart of HR. Ayla's speech wasn't just a call-out, it was a call to responsibility. And the gears began to turn with urgency. Within 48 hours, emergency meetings were held, and leadership realized that their polished diversity reports were nothing but paper. The stories Ayla had lived illustrated the gap between speech and action, and as with any true structural shakeup, the first step was to admit, "We failed." The receptionist was formally warned, as were the managers involved. But this time, not with that typical cold, impersonal letter. No, there was something more direct, the mandatory implementation of a training cycle on cultural sensitivity, empathy, and anti-racism. And it wasn't for checking a box. Ayla made a point to participate in the restructuring process, bringing in specialists, black leaders, and real-life examples. It was the beginning of a cultural cleanse. And unlike the silent cleaning many pretend not to see, this one was loud and necessary. From that point forward, HR understood it wasn't just about quota hiring. but about cultivating a space where every voice could echo. A place where stories weren't interrupted by arrogance, but amplified through genuine listening. The company was finally feeling the weight of a turning point, and Ayla, quietly, kept weaving deep changes from the ground up. What would come next after this transformation? Well, that's the start of another chapter. Ayla didn't want to simply sit in the majority shareholder chair. She wanted to redraw the map, and she did it with purpose, not pride. She publicly assumed her role as a black woman in one of the most elite corners of the market, and more than that, she chose to use her position as a bridge. She launched an internal mentorship program specifically for young black women from underprivileged backgrounds. The idea was simple but powerful: to create leaders who didn't need to disguise themselves to belong. And make no mistake, it wasn't a late afternoon motivational talk. It was him. The mentees received guidance, scholarships, networking opportunities, and most importantly, a space to tell their own stories. Ayla made sure to listen to each one, because she knew that where there's true listening, there's trust building. And in the corporate world, that's still a rare luxury. Many were surprised by the quick results, but only those who understand the power of representation knew exactly why. What's most fascinating is how this quiet yet transformative leadership began to ripple into other departments. People who once only followed spreadsheets started getting involved with causes, with people, with meaning. And all this without Ayla ever pointing fingers. She simply lit the way. And like all purposeful leadership, she knew real change happens when you inspire others to believe they can write new stories too. When people talk about company culture, they often think of slogans on walls or swag-filled events. But Ayla showed that real culture is built day by day, in the details, in conversations, in the way you look or don't look at someone else. Slowly, the employees began to rethink their behavior. Those who used to just follow orders began to ask, do I treat everyone with the same respect, even when I don't know their title? This internal shift sparked a wave of discussions the company had never seen. Listening circles were formed, informal chats between departments began to emerge naturally. The climate of fear that once silenced ideas was gone. And it all started with a woman who had been ignored but refused to stay silent. The stories whispered in the hallways, once marked by indifference, now carried purpose. A question Ayla asked became almost a mantra. How would you treat someone if you didn't know their job title? That simple yet profound question disarmed many egos and brought souls closer together. The company started becoming a place where everyone had both the right and the duty to listen. And in that more human, more open atmosphere, the first seeds of an unexpected future began to grow. That's when one of the most resistant managers knocked on Ayla's door. No agenda, no heads up, just an apology stuck in his throat. With teary eyes, he admitted he had never realized how his actions sustained an exclusionary environment. He said he'd learned more in 1 week than in all his years of leadership. Ayla, with the same serenity of someone who doesn't seek revenge, simply listened. And in the end, with a soft smile, reached out her hand. The gesture was symbolic but also transformational. She didn't just forgive him, she invited him to join the new inclusion board. Because she knew real change doesn't happen through punishment alone, but through reconciliation and accountability. And that's where many stories find redemption, when those who harmed choose to learn, and those who were hurt choose to transform. That kind of posture, by the way, is what separates ordinary leaders from those who leave a legacy. From that moment, other employees began to revisit their own journeys. Stories once buried or silenced began to surface. Conversations became more honest. The company stopped being just a corporation and started becoming a community. And in this new phase, a shared feeling grew. If even the most skeptical manager changed, what else could be possible? Ayla's journey extended far beyond the company walls. It was soon being told at international conferences, in documentaries, podcasts, and universities. And it wasn't just about leadership or entrepreneurship. It was about courage, about humanity, about how the stories that touch the world most deeply are those born from pain but don't stay there. Ayla became a symbol for a generation that doesn't wait for permission to occupy space. She builds her own path and invites others to walk with her. People didn't follow her out of admiration alone, but out of identification. After all, who hasn't been underestimated? Who hasn't felt the need to work twice as hard just to be heard halfway? Ayla gave voice to millions of black women who carry powerful stories, long treated as invisible. And the most beautiful part of all, she didn't want a stage, she wanted impact. And that's why her story wasn't just applauded, it was lived by those who felt seen through her. And that's when the definitive turning point came. Competing companies began to review their own structures, pressured by a wave of transformation that no one could ignore anymore. Because when a single story is capable of illuminating the darkness of an entire system, the world understands that it's not an exception, it's a calling that continues to echo, waiting for the next person to answer. Now tell me, with total honesty, what if it were you in that room? And if, amid the rush, the routine, the goals and reports, someone walked in, someone you'd never seen before, dressed simply, with a discreet posture and observant gaze. How would you treat that person? Would you offer a coffee, start a conversation, or just look away and keep walking? The truth is, how we act when we think no one important is watching says everything about who we are inside. It's not the job title that defines character, it's the attitude and the details. In the split second when no one is paying attention. How many times, without realizing, have you mirrored a toxic environment, ignored a good morning, snapped at someone younger, dismissed an idea just because of who said it? Seems minor, right? But it's in those exact moments that the greatest stories are born. And make no mistake, they always come back. Sooner or later, life makes sure to reveal who was who and who truly deserved to be there. That's exactly what happened with Ayla. Ayla walked into that investment consulting firm as if she had no real purpose. A visitor, maybe a potential client, a black woman with a soft voice and simple clothes. But behind that ordinary image was much more, a life shaped by struggle, courage, and wisdom. And, more than that, there was a clear intention to observe people's true essence, without filters, masks, or formalities. She wanted to understand how employees treated those who didn't seem important, and what she witnessed was, at the very least, revealing. Some ignored her completely. Others were polite but cold. A few just pretended not to see her. But there were exceptions. A receptionist who offered her water with a smile, an intern who struck up a conversation in the elevator, a cleaning lady who made sure to say a heartfelt good morning. Those small gestures reignited in Ayla the hope that not all is lost in corporate environments, and that there are still people who see beyond the name tag. The next day, the roles reversed. Ayla returned to the company. But this time, she was introduced as the new partner of the firm, an influential investor, respected internationally, now joining the company's leadership board. The silence in the meeting room was deafening. Those who ignored her tried to justify their indifference. Others simply looked down. But those who acted with empathy, without knowing who she really was, were recognized in front of everyone. That twist wasn't just a dramatic scene. It was a lesson. A reminder that the greatest stories of leadership and transformation are born behind the scenes, in the moments no one values, when no one is watching. So here comes the big question. How many Aylas have you ignored? How many chances to genuinely connect with someone have you missed because of a rushed judgment? How many doors have you closed simply because someone didn't look like someone important? See, while you're busy trying to impress those at the top, you might be missing the chance to transform alongside those on the lower steps, but with hearts that reach higher than any title. You know what the problem is? Too many people still believe that respect is measured by hierarchy, that kindness is only worth it if it pays off, that attention should only be given to those who can open doors. But what this and so many other stories show is the opposite. The true leader is the one who listens more than they speak, who observes more than they judges, who embraces more than they exclude. Ayla turned the game around because she had courage, strategy, and purpose. She knew leadership isn't about commanding, it's about inspiring. It's not about being feared, it's about being remembered. And are you going to keep playing a supporting role in your own life? Or will you start writing new stories with more awareness, more empathy, and more action? Maybe the world doesn't need more people who impose respect, but people who inspire respect simply by being who they are. This reflection isn't just about one character. It's about me, about you, about all of us. It's a wake-up call to rethink the way we treat those who go unnoticed, who seem small, who haven't yet had the chance to show what they're made of. Because deep down, it's those people who carry the greatest truths. They're the ones who transform environments. They're the ones who star in the most remarkable stories, even when no one's writing about them. So take this insight. Don't let it fade inside you. Share this story with someone who needs to reflect too. Send it to your company's group chat. Discuss it with your team. Print it and pin it on the wall. Because sometimes, a single different action is enough to change the course of many stories, including yours. And if this message inspired you, if it made sense to you, if it stirred something inside, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notifications, and stick with us. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We turn them into tools for change. And the next one might be yours.